If you're here early, by the way, thank you so much for being here on time. Welcome to the first workshop of the STAR program for 2024 to 2025 academic year. My name is Tong. I am one of the doctoral students in social psychology here at U of M. I am co-hosting today's workshop with Dr. Cindy Lastig. She is a faculty member in the CCN Cognitive and Cognitive Neuroscience area here at U of M Psychology Department. So today, just to kick off the workshop series we have both in the fall and also just overall the program for the entire year, we would like to give people like a soft entry into what psychology research is about, what is happening in the lab on campus, and how it may inform or how it may be translated into the real life. Okay. So the agenda today we have is first thing first, I will give you a very brief introduction of what the STAR Scholar Program is about. And then we're going to actually dive into today's topic in terms of what is research, or what is research specifically in psychology or psychology-related field. How can someone get involved in research, especially for undergraduate? And finally, we'll talk about what happens outside of the lab, what happens once you're working with the lab for a while, but when you feel like, I want to, bring really what I do to outside of campus, what happened at that time, or what may happen at that time. Both myself and Dr. Cindy Lastig are U of M affiliated, so most of our resources we talk about, on-campus resources we talk about today, are limited to U of M. So if you are an external attendee, welcome, but some of the resources we talk about here, you may not directly have the access. But very likely there may be a very comparable set of resources at your campus. And hopefully what we discussed today can still be helpful to you. So again, Tong, I am a fourth year graduate student in social psychology. This is my fourth year being the mentor for the STAR Scholars. I will give you the full spelling of STAR later, but I'm pretty sure the acronym or the meaning of the acronym changed once while I was I've been the mentor on this team, so I do need to double check, but I will let you know the full name of STAR in the next slide. And Dr. Cindy Lastig, who will also help me co-run today's workshop and who will be monitoring the chat while I am speaking, and I'll do the same for her when she is speaking. She is a professor of psychology, specifically in CCN, cognition and cultural neuroscience. Sorry, not cultural neuroscience, cognition and cognitive neuroscience, cultural psychology, that's what I do. And she's also been the faculty advisor of the STAR Scholars Program, at least as early as I joined it back in 2020. Oh, by the way, so because of the size of the audience, we would really appreciate that you save some of the longer questions to the Q&A toward the end of the session. However, if you have anything that you want to just pop in the chat, feel free to do that. And Dr. Lustig and I will do our best to monitor the chat and get your questions answered as soon as we can. Okay, so STAR now stands for Scholarship Transferable Skills Academics and Research. The aim of the program is to facilitate underrepresented students' involvement in research and grad school for those who are interested in. So who are part of the STAR? Well, we have student mentors from U of M Psychology Department. All of us, or I think so far all of the mentors are doctoral students from various area. There are 6 or 7 area under psychology here at U of M. Basically, each year we try to make sure there is some representation from each area so that we can cover a wide scope of interest. Julie, she is I believe an advisor, academic undergraduate advisor at the Student Academic Affair office. You might have already met with her. And Dr. Lastig, she is the faculty advisor of this program. Julie helps more with coordination and administrative stuff. And finally, there is you. That is also probably the most important part, most critical component of Star Scholar program. This program is here for you. So we're really glad that you're here today. And also, if there are future events that you are interested, or if you may even be interested in becoming part of the more intense mentoring program in the winter, please apply by November the 3rd, Sunday, and we will review applications and let people know if you become or if you're admitted into the winter program, usually at the very end of the year or at the very beginning of the following year. I will give you the QR code of the application on the following page. But if you're interested in just knowing a little bit more about STAR program, feel free to you can follow this link, or quite seriously, you can just type STAR Scholar on U of M website. The first one or two link you see will direct you to our page, and there will be more information on what we do, who we are, and how to get involved. Okay, so here is the application. I mentioned on the previous page. I'll pause here for a few moments just so that if you're interested in, feel free to make a screenshot or directly scan the QR code. Again, the deadline is November the 3rd, but we're also happy to take questions before this deadline if you just directly email us. Okay. So those are some house maintaining. So now I want to actually get into the meat part of this of today's content. That is what psychology research is about and what happens after psychology research takes place in the lab. So we'll start with what research is about, and that's about generating new knowledge. It's not a one-step thing, it's a multiple step endeavor. Usually start with choosing a topic. Is there something you're interested in? Know a little bit more about what have been done in this field or in its related field. And then hopefully that can help you, refine your topic, get a little bit more specific, and get a better scope, define a better scope of your topic, of your question. From there, design your study. That is, okay, what is one or a few new things that you want to do to help extend or deepen the area that you're interested in? And actually collect the results, collect the data and gather the results, try to generate results for those questions. And usually this is the part that a lot of undergraduate students start to get involved. And of course, I mean, like they may be involved in the background information, the literature review, but really this is maybe the part that is most active for undergraduate research. And then there will be, sharing, disseminating the findings. Sometimes is within your academic circle, sometimes even outside. There may be general audience who are interested in. If you are more involved in interventional science, there may be local stakeholders. But usually there is the sharing finding, the presenting finding end stage of a generating knowledge cycle. And you have heard that, yes, I said the word cycle. So this very linear, very smooth process of generating knowledge is really an ideal scenario that, at least so far for me, never happened. In real life, this is much more a non-linear, sometimes a cyclic process. And you may not directly go from point A to point B as you were planning. A lot of time you're going to be jumping between multiple places. Your question may get even change a little bit as you explore, and you may have new collaborators who hop on the project and bring in new perspectives, or say that, hey, actually I want to insert 2 more questions in the survey, or they was like, hey, I think something you did was cool, but there may be a different way to do it, and I think that will be more effective, or that will be more efficient for the question that you want to investigate. So the key point here is that it's never a straight line. It can be both extremely inspiring, but also sometimes a little bit frustrating. So if you're getting stuck at any point doing research, that's perfectly normal. And a lot of time people find the most exciting things part of their detour, not what they originally not how they originally envisioned the entire project. And so let's kind of trace back to square one, that is think about or find a topic that you're interested in. And from there, it really depends on how much we already know about the field or know about the subject. If we don't know much about it, if it's a very understudied question, or if you're interested in a very underrepresented population, then your work may be more exploratory. That means really you're not diving deep into a specific question, but rather you're trying to understand the phenomena overall, or sometimes even just to describe what is actually happening. You don't have to like, I need to know about everything within two study or within one study. But usually the first step is just looking around. Okay, we don't know much about this, but something interesting is happening. Let me first document that, or let me first record that, leave some record both for myself or for my colleagues for future work. And there are also fields where we already know something about. And that's where maybe you have more power to really try to explain all those phenomena, all those interesting relationships that you have seen, or or other people, your colleagues or previous researchers have seen. So this is where you get a little bit more into trying to understand the mechanism, trying to understand the causes, or trying to understand the outcomes of not phenomena, problems, or relationship that you find interesting. This is a continuum. I am giving you pretty much the two extreme. Usually research questions fall somewhere in between. And also there are maybe a lot of things that you thought you knew or we thought we knew. It turned out that maybe we are not accurate, or maybe our understanding are only limited to a certain portion of the population, or there may be part or a field that you think we don't know much, but if you look around, look outside of psychology, go into sociology, economy, you may feel like they actually have done quite a few things on this area, but they may be just using different terminology, different methods. So this is a continuum. You may fall anywhere in between, and your position may also change as you work through the literature. Okay, types of research questions. Broadly speaking, three of them. First one is basic science or basic research. That is, okay, I just want to understand how it works, what is working in a clean setting. So you may have seen, or you may have participated in research like in a lab on a computer where it doesn't feel natural at all, but you can focus all of your attention on a very well-defined topic with minimal distraction, with minimal going on in the background. So basic research is trying to get to the core in a clean setting. But well, real world it's noisy. So the next step is to translate that. That is, okay, now we know what may hypothetically happen in the lab. Now, how do we really translate that into application? What do we need to know to apply what we found in a clean, almost vacuum-like lab to the real world? And finally, there is clinical, or if you're not particularly interested in clinical or just overall applied research. We know what is the core of the problem. We know who are a good target. Now, how do we actually apply that on the population that we're interested in, or just overall generalize that to a larger population? And in the more recent years, especially if you're interested in interdisciplinary research, there is even a step after clinical or applied research that's called implementation science. That is, okay, it works. It works on 10 people. can I make that work on 1,000 of people? Can I make it work on millions of people? Can I take this program to a different country, a different region, and still make that work? How do my audience actually like my program? Are they going to stick to it? Can I make my program sustainable? So that is more on the implementation science. That is not what psychologists traditionally do. But in the last decade, 2 decades, you definitely see more and more interest, even beyond the clinical, the applied research stage. And that's where you see more community engagement. You see more sustainability and stakeholder interest. Type of research methods, that's where you define your question, define which stage that you wanna focus on, and that's where now you need to think about, okay, what is the best method to answer that question at this particular stage? I am throwing a lot of information to you. This is not a research method class. I don't expect you to remember everything. And also I wanna be clear that these are only still a subset of everything that people do to understand the question that they're interested in. And also a lot of them do like it get combined or do get woven into each other as a research project unfold. So for instance, let's say uh experiment and longitudinal, especially if you're interested in intervention, then almost by default, you have to do a longitudinal study. You need to observe if I apply treatment A, what does it produce at time 1? What does it produce at time 2? And since we already mentioned the word treatment or we already mentioned the word intervention, that also pretty much means that you likely have at least 2 conditions. One is the quote unquote control or default, and the other one is where you apply some kind of a treatment. And there are also programs where they have more than one treatment. So in this case, we are describing a study that uses at least an experimental design with a longitudinal in a longitudinal sense. There are also, case study that can take over time, that can also be longitudinal. You can combine behavioral measures and self-report measures in an experimental study or just in a survey study. Survey study just means that everything is in quote unquote default. I'm not trying to change or impact my participant behavior in any way. I just want them to report or to demonstrate what is going on in their mind. So sometimes it's called a survey, but it's not necessarily just, a piece of paper that people fill out. This means that there's no experimental manipulation. The type of data or the kind of participant you work with, most, at least in my work, quantitative. Sorry, before we get into subject, let's talk about data first. So there are overall 2 kind of research approach or 2 kind of data you might have heard: quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative is more close-ended. You know exactly what you are measuring. You just need to get participants' reaction to those close-ended questions. Because they are numerical, it's easy to it's never easy to work with data, but at least like there is a way to model them. It's possible to compare numerical data across multiple samples. So usually quantitative methods are good when you want to go broad. And when you already know what you are looking into, when you have specific questions, when you are trying to explain. On the other hand, there is also qualitative. That is, those are data that usually qualitative research are done more open-ended. That is, you have some general idea of which phenomena you're interested in, but you are not saying that, hey, today we are only going to answer question A, and here are 6 scales that I want you to rate from 1 to 7. Qualitative, you're gonna basically allow your participants to contribute more to your research question. You're gonna let them, to a certain degree, help you define what you want to observe, what you want to record, and what you want to understand. So this one allow you to get really deep into a topic, but it doesn't allow direct comparison. There's no good way to model qualitative data. I mean, a large language model now does become more and more available. Still, what it does is basically translating qualitative information to quantitative information. But in and of itself, qualitative data usually do not allow easy comparison or easy modeling. So usually they are used more often at the exploratory stage. However, again, in the last 2, 3 decades, a lot of people are trying to do what we call mixed method. That is, they allow both qualitative and quantitative methods to be present in their research, and usually at different stages of their research. So I mentioned that a little bit, but at the beginning, but I do cross-cultural psychology, which means a lot of my work is done outside of the United States. So when we get to the actual cultural comparison, yes, I use quantitative method. We have some pretty standardized questionnaire. But because right now I am focusing on sub-Saharan Africa, one of the underrepresented population in psychology research. So earlier in the summer, I was just there for a whole month doing interview. And the interview, yes, I have a few key questions, but I was not really following any script. So I toss a bunch of topics that I find interesting to my participants. Some of them are college students there, but some of them are just local residents. And they will give me their intuitive insights about how they think their culture works, what they think is valued, what they think is appropriate, and what they think matters in their life. So that was the more qualitative part of my research overall, and whatever reaction I got from those interviews, from those interactions, we are now trying to kind of boil them down to more testable, quantitatively testable hypothesis. So in this way, I'm using qualitative work to inform quantitative methods. And you are seeing more and more people doing this kind of mixed research now. So to summarize, we will start with a topic, any topic that you find interesting, and then we will try to gauge how much do we already know about the topic, what is already available in the literature, what is already available in the quote unquote public knowledge domain. And then from there, we need to, get a little bit more specific, define a question that is at a reasonable scope, that is interesting enough, but also specific enough to investigate. Then then now you need to find the best method for your question. There is no one panacea method that will just answer every single question, but usually there is a better method or a set of better methods for a specific question. And the type of the method you use will pretty much define the kind of data you get. You might have heard the word or the expression trash in, trash out. That is, if you mess up any of the previous stage, you are pretty much compiling up that mountain of trash for your data. So this is a step-by-step step-by-step process, and sometimes you do need to go back and come back again. But the data is really kind of like the end result of all the thoughts, all the preparation you go through before you even interact with participant, before you even get into the field. So what do we mean by psychology research today? Well, here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9 areas that are at least associated with a psychology department here at U of M. Again, if you're from a different institution, then you may have different names for different areas. But psychology, or broadly speaking, behavioral science research is getting more and more interdisciplinary. So if you're interested in any of the topic related here, just saying, psychology research may be something for you. So now I want to get a little bit more specific, talking about labs and the kind of labs that you may encounter and the kind of work that you may do as an undergraduate at the lab. Hierarchy may not be the best word, but this is a structure of a pretty prototypical lab in psychology. Usually we have a principal investigator or principal investigators. Those are usually faculty members or sometimes a maybe not traditional sense professor, but usually these are the most experienced people in the lab, and also most of the time gathering resources fall on their plate, helping others to get to improve their research idea, help them to generate question, and help other lab members to make things happen. So that is the principal investigator. They are a lot of the time the decision maker. They are also the resource maker or the resource collector for the lab. And then you get to graduate students, and sometimes some lab has what we call postdoc scholars or research fellow. So those are the personnel in the lab usually who are on the front line, who are actually designing research, who are sometimes collecting data, and who are writing reports and disseminating those results under the supervision or in collaboration with the principal investigator. There are also labs that use managers, especially for lab that, for instance, expect very intense interaction with participants, or just have for instance, a wet lab that there is just a lot lab maintenance going on. The lab manager is the person who, and sometimes technicians, those are the people who make sure that the lab is just working. And then there is undergraduate research assistants. Usually they work more closely with lab managers or graduate students. If you're at a small lab, you may also directly work with a postdoc or even with the PI, but more often undergraduate research assistants work closely with grad students or lab managers on specific projects. They have more specific tasks assigned to them, at least at the beginning of their time in the lab. And if they've been in the lab long enough, or they get more experience, advanced throughout the time, they may also start to lead their own small project, usually in the format of honors thesis. However, again, at the beginning of their stage in the lab, at the beginning of their training in the lab, usually it's specific tasks associated with specific projects. Some labs also use volunteers. That is, there is maybe no formal credit or payment compensation, but there are people who are just like, I'm interested in your lab and just want to get a taste of it before I decide if I want to commit hours per week. So there are labs that allow more casual involvement. So you can sit in their lab meeting, or the grad students, postdoc, or anyone in the lab are happy to chat with you, but you may not be directly involved in any of the research project per se, because that takes commitment. That also sometimes takes paperwork. So volunteer, if a lab welcomes that, is also a good place to just test the water before you decide if this is a good match for you. So examples of RA tasks, it does depend on what kind of lab you're working with. But if you are working in a lab where you are interacting more with human participants, then that means, well, good luck, you're gonna work with people. So if the lab uses like more of an in-person testing, then RA stand for research assistants. Undergrad RA will help with, like set up the lab, make sure that the equipment are functioning well. Sometimes they also get involved in scheduling sessions, especially if you are working with non-student sample. That just means that you need to do a bit of like a reach out, like, hey, thank you so much for being interested in our study. We have availability for the X and Y day in the coming week. Which time works best for you? Working with different populations, data entry, analyzing video, literature reviews, all of those happen after the data is collected. But overall, for human research projects, those are some common tasks for junior RAs. I don't know much about animal research since I only work with human, but apparently, if you're working with an animal lab, then you're gonna handle animals in a wet lab. That does mean that there may be a certain amount of time that you have to be physically in the lab to take care of the animals. There may be surgeries or post-operative care. You won't have to learn all of this by yourself. There will be someone who walks you through the process. Just be aware that if you're working with animal, very likely that you need to be physically present in the lab uh, at a schedule that works best for the animal, maybe not the best for you. That's just an expectation for animal research. There may be tissue collection, but there may be also just behavioral testing. And of course, once the data is actually collected, there will be some analysis. Sometimes the analysis is on video. In my undergrad lab, not my undergrad lab, but my undergraduate advisor, he works on birds. So a lot of their RA, good proportion of their time is watching bird videos, documenting when the interaction happened between the parent bird and baby bird. But also there are labs that get a little bit more into the molecular or cellular level. Then in those cases, you will be taught to learn about specific molecular techniques that help you process the data or that help you translate the data into numerical form, which are ready for later analysis. And we're living in the digital age, so it's becoming more and more common that people actually just use data that are available for them somewhere in the internet or sometimes somewhere in the library. So we're talking about now like publicly available data or archival data, or sometimes there are quite a few researchers in the psychology field who works on artifacts of human behavior, such as news report, such as let's see, news report, commonly seen that, or what are the most popular songs. You do get some information about the cultural trend from the cultural product we produce. So if you're working on one of those projects, then maybe you're not directly interacting with the participant or with the population that you're interested in, but rather you are studying the record they left behind. Usually if you're involved in these kind of project, you are more involved in the data processing or data analyzing stages of the entire study. So those are all available out there, and different labs have different needs at different times. Okay, so things to keep in mind if you're interested in testing your water in psychology or just overall research. Again, like I said earlier, details vary from lab to lab. They may have different, they may be looking for different skills. They may be looking for different kind of qualifications. They're also gonna offer different kind of training. There may be also labs that are seemingly doing related topics, but have completely different lab dynamics and different kind of work style. So all of those, I can't give you a thorough summary today, but trust me, everyone who is in the lab, it doesn't matter if they're professor or postdoc or grad student or lab manager, they're more than happy to talk about what they do in the lab. So ask around and get some information before you decide which one you want to try first. And so, like we said earlier, responsibilities vary across lab, but also vary with experience, with the time you've spent in the lab. Usually a first year research assistant will have a very different responsibilities than maybe someone who has been in the lab for 3 years, 4 years, or from a lab manager. Lab meeting attendance may be required. It depends on A, who you're directly working with, and B, the size of the lab. So my lab it's somehow getting larger and larger. We have a lab meeting that only involves graduate students, postdoc, and lab manager. But for our undergraduate research assistant, it depends on their supervisor, their graduate mentor, whether they want to have separate meetings with the RA, or if they're just working more one-on-one, meeting as needed. But a lab meeting or regular lab meeting may be expected for some labs, and those time you spend at the meeting or preparing for those meeting do count toward your commitment to the lab. Um, if you like what you do in the lab, and also if you've been here long enough, you've grown enough to lead your own small project, some of your work at the lab may result in an honors or senior thesis. That's not always guaranteed, and also that's not always the need of every research assistant. Some of them want to really just go through the process of an entire project by doing a senior thesis. Some of them are really just like, I'm just interested in one particular method you use in this lab, and I really want to get expertise on that. I'm not particularly interested in raising and answering my own question. However, it's a possibility. And also, if things go really smooth, a thesis may also result in publication, or sometimes, by publication, most of the time, I mean like journal articles, but also sometimes it can be a poster, or maybe a presentation talk at a either regional or national or international conference. So now we are talking about, like, we're getting closer to the dissemination stage of the research. Again, this is not always a guarantee, especially depending on the kind of research you're doing. Some of the research just naturally takes longer, so you may not be always able to stick toward to be with the team and stick toward the very end of the project, though that is possible. And also, especially for those of you who are interested in like more kind of like long-term relationship, if you still want to be part of the lab even after you graduate from U of M or from your undergraduate institute, that is possible. It's just that those are not guaranteed when you enter the lab, and those are the communications that you need to have continuously as you participate in any kind of lab work. And additional skill building, that is almost always, well, that's almost always part of your commitment, because to get you ready to help with the project that we're doing, we also need to first give you some training. However, those training, again, may differ from lab to lab, but may also differ depends on which specific project you get involved and which specific stage you get involved. So there will be some expectation from the lab, but also you can feel free to communicate that, hey, I am interested in doing XYZ. Is there anything like I can do in the lab that give me more exposure to that kind of training? All of those are negotiable. All of those are on the table. They just may not be proposed to you by your mentor, but they usually are pretty happy to open more doors for their mentee. If we hire you, that means we see great potential for you in you, and we are more than happy to help you explore those potentials. Okay, so I'm gonna give you some examples with the 2.5 labs that I work with. My research revolve, broadly speaking, 2 topics. One is culture, or cross-cultural psychology. The other one is self-knowledge or self-insight. So I do have RAs in both labs, and they do have pretty different responsibilities. But overall, the shared responsibilities of my RAs include I do hold my own research assistant lab meeting. So everyone there, minus myself, are research assistants, are undergraduate. We meet bi-weekly. Or I want them to take turn to lead discussion for journal article or for mass media article, anything they find to be related, relevant to what we do in the lab or what they want to do in the long term. Both lab have done in-person studies here on campus, so my research assistants have helped supervising those studies. Sometimes I also ask them, okay, before I launch the study online or before I launch the study to a group of participants, can you help me first test the study design? Is there anything standing out to you? Is your experience smooth? Because if the study is designed in a way that's even confusing for my research assistants who have some understanding of what we're doing, then it's almost guaranteed that it's going to be a disaster with the participants who have to be completely ignorant about the research question. And they've also been they not all of them, but some of them also have done a little bit of data entry and data coding. I will get into specifics as we dive into each individual lab. So the culture part, what does the lab do overall? I throw some keywords here, but basically we try to understand what's going on in humans' mind and in humans' behavior outside of United States middle class white people. So overall, we are interested in how culture, broadly speaking, shape human behavior, shape human thoughts, and shape interpersonal communications. The word weird you see here on the screen stands for Western educated, industrialized, rich, democratic population, which is the best studied population in psychology science, but it only takes about 12% of real human population. And our job or our interest is to go beyond that population. So earlier this year and also last summer, we were actually in the field. We were traveling to Kenya to actually pilot test some of our studies there, to interact with local researchers. And so this is the part that that is mostly done by the PI and the graduate students. But we also have some work ongoing on campus, and also if our undergrad students feel comfortable with data, we also work with some publicly available cross-cultural data released by, for instance, the World Value Survey team, or the MIDAS and IMIJA. MIDAS stand for midlife in the United States, and IMIJA stand for midlife in Japan. So we also work with those data that are not collected by ourselves, but do also address some of our questions. So what do we graduate students do? We design research, we implement them, we present the finding if we have any or when we have any, and we try to disseminate those findings through publications, presentation, posters. And like I said earlier, usually the graduate students are more involved in the actual field work and international coordination. Try schedule a meeting that works for people in 6 countries across 7 time zones. That's the kind of work that I do. And we do have lab managers. Actually, we have 2 of them because there are a lot of coordination going on in this lab. So like I said earlier, they are the people who make sure that things happen at the time they should and in the place they should. So our lab managers take care of logistics, take care of administration. Sometimes they help with recruiting research assistants, help with IRBs or research ethics, preparation or amendment. And also they are involved in data analysis as well. Oops, sorry, the last one should be what do research assistants do? Like I said earlier, RA meetings, in-person studies, data coding and entry. Some of our data do not come in numerical format, and our research assistant help us to translate that into data that is easier for modeling, for analysis. And then one of my research assistants who have been with us for a while, she is doing her honor thesis this year, and she is actually analyzing the MIDAS data that I mentioned earlier. So that is how my culture lab works. And about the self and social insight, yes, it's shortened into SASE. And for SASE lab, what we're most interested in is self and what people think they know, but actually don't know much about themselves. So the study I personally do here, usually limited right now with University of Michigan students. We do more experimental clean study in the lab to get very specific into psychological processes or psychological mechanism that we're interested in. But some some other students in the lab, they may be interested in political psychology, so motivated reasoning or group identity. And also earlier, Dr. David Dunning, the PI of the lab, was also just analyzing publicly available data on performance and confidence. So I don't remember what PISA stands for, but they do have, I think, middle school students' performance on math and science across multiple countries, and also people's confidence, students' confidence in their performance. So that's the kind of work we do here. My job in terms of like actual task are pretty similar between between two labs, just working on different research topic. And I do have the task of actually locating Dr. David Dunning on campus because sometimes it's hard to find him. But my undergrad here, because we are doing a lot of research actually on campus, so my RA at the SASE lab are a little bit more hands-on. They are many of the time running the study themselves, and those studies can be pretty interactive. There may be time we even use deception. So my RA need to be trained for delivering research in a very believable way. And because we use experiment, so we do manipulation in our study. My research assistants also help me test those manipulation before I deliver them to the participants. So they give me feedback. They say that I think something is not working, or I think this is working perfectly well. It's something working on a Windows computer, also work on MacBook. So all of those, my research assistants help me just prepare the project before we actually launch it. So I think I wrap up everything that I want to talk about for the first half of the workshop. Any quick question? Like, is there any like clarification question? Sorry, I've been not looking at the chat. Not sure if, okay, I didn't miss anything. Okay, if that's the case, let's take a mini break. It's 4:52 right now. We will resume 4:57, I guess. And I'll let Dr. Lustig take the second half of the workshop.
Great. Thank you so much, Tong, and we will see you all in about 5 minutes. So go ahead and take your bathroom break, get a drink, stand up and stretch, do whatever you need to do.
Mhm.
Again. And so one of the things that we'll also talk about is, sort of going from the lab to real life. And there are many different career options that you can do if you want to be a professor. So let me see. Um, and so if you do research, there are actually quite a few career options that you can have. I will say one of the things that I actually like about being a professor is that you get to use a lot of different skills in a lot of different ways. And even there, you get to have some translation to real life. So, in one of my lines of research, what we do is we collaborate with people who study neurotransmitters in animals, and then we take a look at our lab in humans, but then I go over and I talk with people in the med school, and we see how this works in people with Parkinson's disease, and then we further collaborate with some of the pharmaceutical companies to see if we can help improve their medicines. And so that's one way in which you can go from the lab to real life. But let's say that you're not really sure if you want to do it. What other kind of skills can you learn from this? So one of the great things, and it's one of the reasons the T in STAR stands for transferable skills, and you're going to have a bunch of different skills that you can end up using in a lot of different places. So research skills, so you're going to learn to frame a research question. So just learning how to analyze a problem and understanding how to kind of conceptualize ideas around it, start thinking about what good solutions are, how to gather information, observe it. I mean, those are things that we all kind of know how to do, but we can all get better at. And one of the things that you get from research training is formal training in how to do those. So that is one other thing that I just wanted to bring up from what Tom was saying before. Like, maybe it sounds sort of scary to do this whole process of coming up with an idea, and then how am I going to test the idea, and how I'm going to evaluate the idea. One of the great things about getting involved in a lab is you are getting that hands-on experience with people who have done it not that long ago and learned it themselves. And so they're going to be teaching you and training you how to do this. Likewise, analytical skills. So you're going to learn how to define a problem and break it down from something that is a really big issue into something that you can actually sink your teeth into and start understanding and collecting data on. So, maybe you go from a question about, why do people with this disease, why do they think this way, or why do they forget these things but not those things? And then you start to organize the information. You learn how to collect the data to help you answer that question. You're also going to learn a lot of practical skills in terms of learning to analyze the data. So if you're doing qualitative data, you'll learn how to read a bunch of responses that people give and extract out the big themes and say, what are the important kinds of things from this? So then if you were to go on to a business or to a consulting firm, then maybe you would help to organize focus groups. On the other hand, maybe you're doing more, quantitative research. As Tom was talking about, you're going to learn how to take all of these different numbers that you get from people's questionnaires and from their behavioral responses and learn how to translate that into something you can actually say, okay, this I think is just chance, but this I think is what is really going on. You're also going to learn a ton of interpersonal skills. Research labs are teams. And, some of us really like teamwork in the classroom. When you get the group work assignment, some of us really don't. But when you are working in a research lab, it really is like everybody's invested in it. Everybody has their role. This Tom was talking about, like, use the research assistant. Like, you're going to have part that your part that you're contributing. It's going to be really important that you talk to your graduate students and talk to the lab managers about, hey, I noticed this is going on in the experiment. So you're going to learn to communicate that with them. And they're also going to communicate back to you, like, hey, here's the big picture of what we're doing. Here's why we're doing this research. And so you have that back and forth between each other. And so you really learn how to collaborate, how to listen and understand each other. You are going to learn patience and responsibility. And especially if you're working with human participants, there is a customer service aspect of it too. So in my lab, we test older adults from the community. And yes, we pay them, but they are also really doing us a favor to come in. And so it's important for us to learn, like, okay, how do we interact with them to make sure that they have a really good experience? And so that's something that's going to be important in any kind of lab that you work in. Um, you have a bunch of different career options. Again, tenure faculty at a university. So that's basically what I do. And as I said, I love this job. One of the reasons that I love it is that you can really sort of almost write your own job description and you can change it at different parts of your career. So a bottom line of it is, I get to create new knowledge and tell people about it. And so that to me is super exciting because I get to learn something about how the mind and the brain works that nobody ever knew before. And then I get to put that out into the world. And while I'm doing that, I get to talk to other really smart people and get their ideas on things. And so that's one big part of what I do is the research, but to tell people about it. So also the teaching. So I get to interact with a lot of really smart students, much like yourself. I get to supervise them in their honors theses and sort of see them grow as they start off from freshmen who are scared and maybe don't even know, aren't really sure what they're doing. And then I see them become seniors and go on and graduate and do amazing things that I never would have dreamed of. Um, and then in other parts of my career, I've done more administration. So I get to do things like STAR, where I get to help to coordinate between the graduate students and the undergraduates. I get to guide some parts of the academic curriculum that we have here and sort of choosing how the university or how the department puts together what kind of classes are we going to put together and how are we going to decide which statistics classes you have to take. So one of the nice things about doing a tenure track faculty at a university is you really have a lot of freedom to sort of design your career and pursue your own interests. Some people, after they do the research, they sort of say, well, this was fun, but maybe it's not as much what I want to do. Maybe my real true deep love is teaching. So you also have that option. On the other hand, maybe you decide the teaching is not your gig. And so you're like, maybe I'm going to focus really specifically on the research, but maybe I don't want to be the one who necessarily has the responsibility for setting the agenda for the lab. So then you might be a postdoc or a research scientist. On the other hand, you can also decide, you want to go work for Google. So, Tom was talking a lot about how when you're designing the experiments and the studies, you already need to be thinking about how you're going to get this out to your participants. And so you're going to be doing a lot of user interface research, even just to get your experiments work. And Google and other companies are incredibly interested in that because, if you think about what they're doing when they're trying to optimize their search algorithms or trying to optimize their advertisements, that is all psychology underneath. If that sounds a little bit too much to you, like selling your soul, then you can go in the other direction and you can work with an international organization or with an NGO and use the kind of information that we have to say, well, okay, how do we know about what do we know about how groups in conflict interact with each other and how could we benefit that? Or how can we effectively get information out to people about this nutrition program or about the savings program? And what is a good way to, based on what we know about psychology, so that we get that information to people and we motivate them to use it? Private institutions or a think tank. So one of my former students, he got interested in political psychology. And so now what he's doing is he's working with a consulting firm and they're helping basically global corporations guide their investments and their charitable donations in ways that advance their goals. Government and public sector too. So a lot of the things that you can do leading up either different granting agencies or leading up things like the FDA and going through and sort of saying okay, let me help to guide the research or let me get that research out to the public. So really the possibilities are pretty endless. These are all places that many University of Michigan graduates go to from psychology. Facebook Meta is actually one of the biggest employers of graduates from our program. But you have Pew Research Center, Department of Defense is a big one. They're very interested in working. Mayo Clinic, Google, Netflix, Amazon, basically anywhere where you're sort of taking in information and trying to reformulate it, connect it with other information. Those are skills that you're going to be able to use in almost any career. And so the possibilities really are endless for you. The other thing is that, if your research could potentially change the world. So just to give you a couple of examples, you know, part of the reason that our schools were desegregated was because of the research of a psychologist. So Mamie Phipps Clark, she was one of the first psychologists. So she studied racial preferences and identity in Black children. And some of you may have heard about her famous doll studies. And students who have been raised in segregated schools were asked to choose which dolls they like. And they found that even a lot of the Black children chose the white doll. And so they realized, oh, this is not good because we're perpetuating these stereotypes. We need to get kids in together so that way they understand each other and build better self-concepts too. Reiko True, so she's another person. So she became very passionate about mental health in Asian Americans because there are cultural differences there in how people understand things, and sort of coming from an immigrant background, how does that influence your interactions with the American society? And so, you know, the mental health needs of that population are potentially different from that of people who were maybe born, you know, people like me who were born in Ohio, let's say, or somebody who was born in Detroit. Like, all of those people are going to have different backgrounds, and so their mental health needs and what's going to be effective for them is going to be different. And so she helped to sort of establish centers that really help to meet those specific needs. Likewise, George Sanchez, he got his start in low-income public schools. And so he used that really to motivate himself, and, you know, became involved in education. And so we really need to combat the inequalities in education and unfair treatment in the education system. And, you know, he was also one of the first people to challenge biases in IQ tests. And so, you know, on a related front, like many of you may have heard, like some standardized tests, a lot of universities now are getting away from using them because they are concerned about the cultural biases. And so he would be somebody who sort of like started all that off. Jennifer Aberhart, so she's somebody who is still very actively researching. Her research is very important because she takes a look at how people of different racial backgrounds interact with the police and how they get treated by the police. And then she then uses that research to help create policies that will lead to better and more fair treatment across race. And then my personal favorite to end with always, because he is a Michigan graduate, is Neil Lewis. And so he is now a professor, you know, particularly relevant right now since we are in the political season. So he writes for 538, the polling site that you see that's, you know, we're all looking at anxiously and checking to see where the election results are looking like they're going to be. He frequently writes for, like, you know, major publications, The Atlantic, Washington Post, New York Times. But also he was part of a special committee that was advising during COVID about how to get vaccines out to different populations and especially low-income populations. And, you know, making sure that we have health equity. And he also helps to operate, he organized this thing right here in Lansing called Lansing Saves. And again, that's for low income first generation families in Lansing. And it helps them understand the importance of organizing their finances to help their children save for college. So that way they can go on and do that. And not only just saying like, okay, this is an important thing, you should do that, but sort of giving people the tools to help them learn how to do this. And so this is the kind of research that you can do as a psychologist and then translate it out and really see it making a difference in people's lives. Oops, wrong direction. Sorry about that. So how do you get involved? Well, you are taking the first step here today. So programs like STAR can help you sort of learn about the different research possibilities. Hopefully we've given you an idea of just how wide the options are for you and sort of what you can learn from this kind of experience. There are programs, so if you are here at Michigan, you can join the Undergraduate Research Opportunities Program, and that will be a way to help connect you with different labs, and they also give you some training on some of those transferable skills right in there. If you are not a Michigan student, I would say first take a look within your own department. They may have similar programs. Talk to your undergraduate advisory office in your psychology department or in your neuroscience department, and see if they have some suggestions for you for how to get started. If you're at a smaller school and you don't have necessarily access to a lot of research that's going on there, there is a summer program that's called the Summer Research Opportunities Program. If you Google UMich, SROP, and then you can apply and then you can join a lab here at Michigan or at a number of other schools over the summer, and you get the summer research experience. And that's a really great thing to do too, because now you're starting to make connections outside of your university. You're getting to know people in your field that can connect you to different types of research and open up new opportunities for you. If you are here at Michigan in particular, stay tuned to our department newsletters, get on some of the mailing lists, look for the talks. So, if a talk comes through and you see the advertisement for it and it looks like a researcher that you might be really interested in, go to the talk and ask questions. Like, a lot of times undergraduates are afraid to ask questions, but I can tell you I've organized many of these talks and the speakers are absolutely thrilled when undergraduates come and they ask questions, because we're all really excited about what we're talking about. And so when we see you get excited and curious too, that is like literally, that's like the most rewarding thing for us. And so don't be afraid to go and ask questions, go up and talk to them afterwards. Another great way to do this is get to know your GSIs, or if you're not here at Michigan, your teaching assistants. They are often the first connection for you to a lab. Because as Tom was saying, in many cases, like especially if the professor is running a bigger lab, we're not always the ones who are working most directly with the undergraduates, and we're often not the ones who are making sort of the hiring decisions in some ways. But your GSIs, like, they're very busy. They're organizing their projects, they're running their projects, and they also know what all of their friends who are also GSIs and graduate students are doing. And so go and talk to them about your interests and say like, hey, I think I want to do this. Is this what your lab is doing? Or if your lab isn't doing it, can you help me point me to somebody who will be? And again, your GSIs, the graduate students, they were in your shoes not that long ago. And so they are going to really want to be able to help you make that next step. If you're here at Michigan, there are a couple of options that you can use for getting the course credit. And so one of them is Psych 326. So that is 1 to 4 credits with at least 3 working hours per credit. You'll usually just work out with your graduate mentor and your faculty member, like exactly what your duties are going to be for that. The other option that you can do if you want a little bit more of a class structure around it is Psych 331. And in that case, you'll actually take a class that counts for you for your methods lab, and it will walk you through more formally writing a paper. So they're both terrific options. I would say 326 is a little bit less structured. 331, it has a little bit higher demand, but you'll also get a little bit more formal training. They're both great options. And so that is most of what we have for you today. So do you guys have any questions? If you're afraid to raise your hand to speak up, you can put them in the chat too. All right, well, if we don't have any questions, then I will say that we will see you next time. Our next one is the graduate school application process. And I would say, even if you are in your first or second year, this is still the good one to attend, because by the time that you get to your 4th or 5th year of undergraduate, you'll have want to lay the groundwork for you to get ready to do your application. So I think you'll still find some things that are useful here, but especially if you are thinking of applying to graduate school this fall, this one will be especially useful. If you're a Michigan student, you can also apply for our winter mentoring program. You'll meet with us on Tuesday evenings, and then you'll both get big workshops like these, but they'll be in person instead of over Zoom. And you will also get a graduate mentor that will work with you and a couple of other students individually. Here's a good question. So, how do you connect with GSIs if you don't have any related to your field for your classes this semester? My suggestion in that case, are you here at Michigan? Okay, great. So my suggestion for you then would be go to the SAA office and ask about the MAPS program. And so that will connect you with graduate students who have it's a different kind of mentoring program than STAR because it's not as one-on-one as STAR is in some ways, but they are graduate students who will help you find research and will talk to you about your interests. The other thing I think you can do is you can also just, look at lab pages. So if you go to the psychology webpage, look up graduate students who are doing things that are, of interest to you, send them an email and say, hey, I'm really interested in your research. I know you're probably super busy, but would you have an opportunity to talk about this sometime?
There is an earlier question in the chat
Oh,
asking about newsletter. So if you're in U of M Psych or BCN or Cognitive Sciences major, your email address is by default signed up for our newsletter. You do need to scroll down, like search a little bit in the newsletter to see if there are any new announcements about like RA recruitment. Those are not always there for every single newsletter you get, but there are overall other information that you may find helpful, including like any visiting speakers or any new classes that may be offered at the psych department in the coming semester. If you're not in psych or BCN major, I believe there is a way to just add yourself to the newsletter on U of M psych department. I don't have that link right now, but I'll look for that, and once I find it, I'll put it in the chat. And also, I don't think we are sharing the slides per se, but
I didn't. It said I was screen sharing. I'm sorry.
okay.
Did it not come up?
No, it did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
actually
understand
get the slides. I don't think we're sharing the slides per se, but we recorded the session, and I know
see what you're saying.
Julie will post that once
When she has a chance to
processing.
process it and edit the
Yeah.
awkward things like this. Evan, you have a question.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for the presentation. I was wondering about in terms of getting materials together for graduate school, if you guys think that, like, I want to apply to clinical psychology programs,
Okay,
and I just did a research experience this summer, and I'm wondering, I
great.
have one more summer. So I'm wondering if you guys think that it's better to find a clinical experience for next summer or do another research program.
So we'll talk about that more next time, but just to kind of give you a little bit of a preview, with clinical psychology in particular, it may also depend a bit on what kind of clinical psychology you want to do. So if you want to do something where, you're really focused on working with clients and almost doing more like the social work aspect of things, then more the clinical experience may be important. If you are interested in doing a PhD where you are also going to be doing the research, and a lot of times like getting the PhD, even if you do want to do practice later on, like on the way there, you need to do the research. In that case, I would actually focus more on the research aspect of things.
Okay.
Because you are also going to learn a lot of transferable skills of working with people and so on in the research.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so be sure to come to our next one, and we'll talk a little bit more about the different kinds of clinical psychology programs. And we'll also have a reference to a book there that you can look at that helps you evaluate the different kinds of programs and see what you think might be a good fit for you.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Great. So the winter mentoring program, unfortunately, is not open to non-University of Michigan students. Again, what I would probably suggest is that you go to whatever your psychology department's undergraduate office is and ask them if they have suggestions for that. Oh, and then to do the contact email, did you mean to get on the psychology email list?
The psych. Sorry, what do you say?
Okay, yeah. I think you can email psych.admin at UMich.
I think either that psych.admin or like SAA.
Yeah, either one of them, and just say that you
Mhm.
saw it from a STAR presentation.
Yep. Would you recommend a winter mentoring program for seniors and juniors? I personally have mentored juniors and seniors over the winters. I will say that students at different stages in the program would have different needs. And the good thing about small group mentoring is that usually the mentors can, to a certain degree, customize in a way that like really try to cover everyone's needs. If you are junior or senior and you're just still new to research, that is perfectly fine. But if you are juniors and seniors and totally new to research and want to apply, especially if you're seniors and want to apply immediately, we can still like provide help, but we are not directly helpful in terms of getting into the program that you want at the time you want. So it's more like see the winter mentoring program as a scaffolding, and we can scaffold in the way that best help you. However, the actual action still relies on our mentees themselves, though we are happy to continue providing support even after you quote unquote graduate from the program.
All right, Evan, did you have another question, or is your hand still up from before?
Oh, sorry. I meant to put it down.
No problem. All right, and one other thing that I will mention just for potential lists, and this will be mostly Michigan related, but I do also put some just general things on there. If your interests tend to be more in the cognitive neuroscience area, especially human imaging, I run a Sunday email list that has a lot of professional development opportunity workshops. Some of them are online, so even if you're not a Michigan student, you could attend those. And then they will also advertise for graduate student positions and post-bac positions. So basically research jobs that you can get after you graduate with your undergraduate degree, but you're not quite ready to go into graduate school yet. So if you're interested in signing up for that, just shoot me an email and I can add you. Again, that's mostly for people who are interested in human neuroscience, but you're welcome to go on and you'll just get an email from me every Sunday. All right, any other questions? All right, thank you guys. Have a great rest of your afternoon.